today on an all-new Dr. Phil. Innocent citizens are being brutally attacked by known criminals who, by law, should be in jail. You were just walking down the street and you got hit by a 10-inch bolt.
I just yelled to him, "Why did you do this to me?"
He was on probation for attacking 3 separate women by the time he had attacked me.
What in the hell is going on? Let's do it.
Have a good show, everybody. Here we go.
This is a safe place to talk about hard things.
Stand by. We'll count you down.
Today is going to be a changing day in your life.
5, 4.
Get ready to take care of you. What we're talking about today could affect any one of us here, and it makes us question just how safe our streets really are. A model brutally attacked in a New York City subway by a suspect reported to have 44 prior arrests, including violent crimes. Yet he walked free. A famous athlete stabbed at a gas station by a suspect on parole for armed robbery. A woman murdered at her job in a high-end furniture store by yet another suspect with a lengthy criminal history, including attacking a police officer. What in the hell is going on? Innocent citizens are being brutally attacked not by someone inexplicably going off the rails and shocking everyone, but by known criminals who, by law, should be in jail. Look, there are no simple answers as to why. Olympic volleyball medalist Kim Glass is herself questioning victim versus perpetrator rights after she says she was brutally attacked by, you guessed it, a career criminal. Take a look.
I was in downtown LA. As I was leaving lunch, I was outside. This homeless man ran up. He had something in his hand. He just looked at me with some pretty hateful eyes. Before I knew it, a big metal pipe hit me. It happened so fast, he literally flung it from the street, so he was not even close to me at all. He threw it so hard. They got him and they held him down until the cops came.
What's wrong with you?
Right now, it looks like my vision will be okay. I got really great stitching from the doctor. I do have multiple fractures up here and a small one here. There's a lot of mentally ill people on these streets right now, and you shouldn't have to be fearful when you walk, but it's true. And so you guys just be safe, okay?
Well, Kim, it's good to meet you.
Hi.
Sorry for the circumstance.
It's weird watching that.
It is weird watching, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as I say, I'm sorry for the circumstance. So you were just walking down the street.
Yeah.
And you got hit by actually a 10-inch bolt, right?
Yeah. Completely unprovoked.
Okay. And what did you find out about who attacked you when you got into the facts of the case?
Yeah. I found out that he had already attacked another woman with a metal pipe. Another woman that he chased also and attacked her with a hammer. That he also had a misdemeanor against another woman, and that also was in the DA's office. He punched her, sucker punched her while she was walking. He attacked another woman, all women, by the way, with golf clubs. And then he's also AWOL'd about, I think it was 3 to 4 times from rehab facilities. So they had given him multiple chances to get himself right, and they trusted him to be, I don't know why, to make the best decisions for himself when obviously he wasn't capable of doing that.
I've always said that the best predictor of future behavior is relevant past behavior.
Right.
So this was somebody that was in the system.
Yeah.
They knew of him. They knew what his proclivities were. Mm-hmm. And when you go into the system, they do investigations pre-sentencing. They have your records. They have your criminal history. They know when a judge has this person standing in front of them, it's not a stranger. They know what his priors are, what his proclivities are, right, whether he's complied with alternative sentencing, if he's met with his parole officer, et cetera, et cetera. They know all of that. And what you're saying is he had demonstrated that not only would he not comply, but when he was out, when he would go AWOL, he would reoffend. So if he had been incarcerated, he wouldn't have been out there to hit you in the face with a 10-inch steel bolt and crush your eye, the orbital region, fractures here, fractures there.
Like I'm standing like right here and he's across there and I see him and he runs up to the car and he has that in his hand. And then he just is like looking through like my eyes. It was bad. And so I was about to go like this and be like, hey, man, I think this guy's about to hit your car. He looks crazy. But before I can do it, I saw him move. And after that, I didn't see anything else. So then at that moment, I got hit and I felt myself. I was like, what just happened? Like, you know, when they say, you don't know what hit you? Me. Yeah. I didn't know it hit me, literally. And then I got on the ground and I'm like trying to call the police. And my hands just start shaking and I'm sitting there getting mad at myself because my hand's shaking and I'm not acting the way I think I would have acted. I hear someone say, it wasn't me. And then I heard an accent, so I didn't know if they had the wrong person. So I just was like, you know, it's the black guy behind the car. And I just wanted them to get the right person. And then they went and did that. And by the time I had crawled to look to see, my friend was getting him on the hood of the car and then put him on the floor, on the ground. And then he put his foot on his back. And this other guy came and was like, go help her. And I'll hold him here until the cops come.
Okay, and when the paramedics got there, they said they actually recognized this guy.
Him, yes. Actually, another transient was there. He walked up while I was sitting there bleeding, and he goes, man, he does this all the time.
And even in that moment, you said you actually felt kind of sorry.
I went through, like, waves of it. Like, I work with homeless, you know, and so, like, I went through waves of, like, being pissed off, you know, and just I saw that metal piece that he hit me with, and I wanted to pick it up and hit him. I'm not gonna lie. And then I was like, and I looked at him, I'm like, he's probably mentally ill. Like, what would that do? It does nothing, you know? And I just went back and forth with it the whole time. And thank you, sorry. At one point, I just yelled to him. Instead, I just go, why did you do this to me? You know? And he was just laying there like this, and he just shaking his head like that. And apparently he told the cops that someone stole something from him earlier, and he was upset, and he didn't mean to hurt me. But his aim was impeccable.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you're a little hard to mistake for someone else.
Yeah.
I mean, you're, like you say, 6'2" Olympian, so a little hard to mistake you for someone that maybe had taken something from him. All right. You're not going to believe this, but next we're going to meet another woman. We're going to add her to the conversation, who says she too was violently assaulted by the man accused in Kim's attack.
We are learning more tonight about the man arrested for attacking former Olympian Kim Glass.
Another victim has come forward.
He just came up behind me and he socked me. And I started stumbling forward and I was just crying.
More tonight about the man arrested for attacking former Olympian Kim Glass in downtown.
Tonight, another victim has come forward describing her attack and her fears that this man would strike again.
He just came up behind me and he socked me. It felt like a bike had hit me. And I started stumbling forward and I was just crying. And a security guard pepper sprayed my attacker.
More other people like that are going to hurt more people. Something has to change because what we're doing now, it's not okay. This man has been let out multiple times.
By the grace of God, Kim is alive and healing, but I just can't imagine if he bashed her head in and she died and it would just be another murder in downtown LA. I feel like this was entirely preventable.
Well, that was Irene Lee, who says she was attacked by the same man as Kim 2 years ago. Now, more and more victims from across the country are reporting being attacked by complete strangers who are no strangers to the criminal justice system. Now, Irene Lee, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you were blindsided, right?
Yes, and before I get into that, I just want to commend Kim for being so brave for being here because this is just about a month after she was attacked. And I just want to say that it's amazing to have her here and be a be a voice for the other victims.
You bet. And I say that to both of you because I've dealt with a lot of victims of violent crime, and you do feel violated, and you feel like it can happen to you anytime once it happens to you, and it changes you. And I know that it's changed both of you. And you say that yours and Kim's case is a clear example of the downfall of the progressive reform that has really kind of infiltrated the criminal justice system, and you should know because you've worked in that system.
I was a prosecutor until November of this last year, and what I want to say is that I think a lot of people who work in the system, they're well-intentioned and they want to get help for the offenders, but in our case, I felt like the court forgot about the victims. You know, he had multiple victims that he had attacked. He was on probation for attacking 3 separate women by the time he had attacked me. And he was given multiple chances to go to a mental health program, but it didn't really have much consequence because he could walk off at any time. I felt like in our situation, you know, why do victims have to fight so hard to be heard? You know, we shouldn't have to be in that situation.
Well, no, 3 or 4 times that he's been given these alternative sentences, he's just stayed a few times, stayed a little while, and then disappeared. So they know that. They know he's not suited to that, but they put him in it again, he walks off again, put him in again, walks off again, put him in again, walks off again, and reoffends while he's out. Now, I was really interested in what you said in your victim's impact statement, and I just have some excerpts of it. When I found out that this court chose to reinstate the defendant on probation without considering the impact on me, it was offensive. How many more women did the defendant have to hurt for it to matter to the court? He does not appreciate or learn from the privilege of probation. He deserves a timeout from society, so one less person has to worry about their safety. This was offensive to you, right?
It was, especially, you know, like I said, I was a DA at the time, and just, you know, you see a pattern and you think that there's going to be accountability. The violent offender, his rights are being considered above mine, and, you know, why should I be collateral damage, or why should another woman be collateral damage?
Now, if this was an isolated event, it would be unfair to talk about this, but it's not an isolated event. It's happening over and over and over again. Eric Siddall says his boss, current LA County District Attorney George Gascon, has helped make the streets of Los Angeles less safe due to his fake progressive social experiment. He works for him now. That's after the break. You've had a family member that was let out.
Yeah, he was recently let out after 35 years in prison.
Should he have been?
Absolutely not.
LA County District Attorney George Gascon is tonight defending his handling of the previous cases involving the shooter who killed 2 El Monte police officers last week.
I want to express my deepest condolences to both the Paredes and the Santana family. The outcome in this particular case, given what we knew then, no history of violence, very little contact with the criminal justice system for nearly 10 years, was appropriate.
Progressive district attorneys like Los Angeles County DA George Gascon are under attack due to what many claim is a pro-criminal agenda that emboldens criminals, leaves residents unsafe, and victims abandoned. Now, Eric Siddall is a current deputy district attorney in Los Angeles County and says George Gascon has hijacked the DA's office and placed the rights of criminals above those of victims. Now, that's a bold statement, Eric.
Well, it's also true. Look, I'm the vice president of the Association of Deputy DAs. We represent the line prosecutors who are seeing the effects of George Gascon's policies. 98% of our prosecutors, of the line prosecutors, voted to endorse the recall of this current DA because they see the effects of his policies.
LA County has had a lot of early prison releases. And one of those, Gascon's directive allowed the release of suspect Andrew Cachu. He was serving a 50-year to life sentence for murder, rearrested for drug, firearm, and fleeing from police charges. And what happened with him?
This is another example of his ideologically based policy. The DA said no person who's ever committed a crime while they were a juvenile should ever be held accountable as a criminal. In other words, because of the way that the juvenile justice system works in California, their jurisdiction ends at 25, which means that the only way to properly hold some juveniles accountable for heinous acts is to send them to the criminal system so that they can be in custody for longer than 25 or after 25 years old. Cachu was one of those people that had been tried in the criminal system, was brought back to the juvenile system. And again, George Gascon, not using a case-by-case analysis, not looking at the individual facts, made a decision that all people in that guy's situation should be released. And of course, he was released and is now charged with another crime. The problem with these ideological prosecutors is they have no plan about what to do with these people once they get back on the street.
Oh boy, are we going to talk about that?
Because the idea, their whole thing is, it's like a hope and a prayer. Let's hope and pray that they do better instead of actually doing something that makes everyone else safe, but also makes sure that that person gets the services they need. It's really unfair, not just only to the victim, but also to the defendant, especially if the defendant has a mental health issue.
All right, we got to take a break. Next, there are many who support a transition away from a tough-on-crime approach and insist reform is needed to keep our streets safe while applying a more humane approach to those who are apprehended. We'll talk about that after the break.
The constant vilification of law enforcement is creating an atmosphere where police officers don't want to stay on the job.
The manhunt is over for the suspect wanted in the brutal slaying of a young woman working at an upscale furniture store in Los Angeles. A Good Samaritan recognized him from images, including this surveillance video. The person called authorities, and it turns out the suspect is well known to police because he has a lengthy list of arrests on both sides of the country.
Phrases like out on parole and long criminal history have become synonymous with headlines about civilians being attacked and murdered by complete strangers. But the question is, why is this happening? Eric Sedal, who we've met, and Betsy Smith, a retired police sergeant and spokesperson for the National Police Association, says a progressive approach that places criminals' rights over the rights of victims is the reason why. Now, Christine DeBerry, who was once chief of staff for the recently recalled San Francisco district attorney, and Reverend Shane Harris, who is the president of the People's Association of Justice Advocates, says victims are at the forefront of reform. Reverend, let me start with you. You say the victims' rights are at the forefront of this progressive reform, but when you hear about stories like Kim and Irene Lee and many others that are victimized by reoffenders, it doesn't feel that way.
The news and the media is running a lot of stories about these reoffenders and these folks who have committed violent offenses consistently, but they're not telling the story about the youth who turned their life around. They're not telling the stories about people who went through diversion programs and that they actually work for the round table and for the support system that is created around.
Well, are these just acceptable casualties? Is that what you're saying?
I believe that these kinds of incidents are not necessarily, casualties, but they are also not isolated. They are isolated incidents in the context of how they are being promoted and talked about by the news media. And what you don't see is you don't see the plethora of success from diversion, from a criminal justice reform perspective.
Really, because I listened to what the DA says in San Francisco and what the DA says here, and they're out beating the drum on how much they're reducing the prison population. Castro could have said the same thing with the flotilla in 1980 when he emptied the prisons and sent them all off the island, many of whom showed up in Florida. Yeah, he reduced the prison population substantially as well, but he didn't have a plan. Do you have a plan?
Absolutely. I mean, my office, my organization worked with a young man in San Diego County, working with San Diego County District Attorney Summer Stephan, who's actually a moderate. We worked closely with her to literally put a roundtable of clergy and community leaders and support system around this young person. He was about 14, had committed, was a part of a robbery and a couple of other things that had taken place. And we were able to put a support system around him. Now he's doing really well in programs in San Diego County and has actually been admitted into the military. So these opportunities are the stories that need to be told.
Well, Betsy, you've been in law enforcement. How do you think the officers feel about this?
Well, what's happening now is that the perpetrators of not just misdemeanors, but violent felonies are beating the police officers back to the neighborhood that they are patrolling in a single shift because of not just progressive prosecutors, but bail reform and the constant, that along with the constant vilification of law enforcement is creating an atmosphere where police officers don't want to stay on the job. So now we have a pro-criminal system, and I believe it's a pro-criminal system, and now we don't have enough police officers to help keep the population safe.
This is the reason that progressive district attorneys are not the epitome of the rise in crime across our country in big cities and regions. There's been a lot of language about this is the highest crime in the country that we've ever faced. That's not true. We are facing a rise in crime in big cities, but we have to remember that someone has to be arrested in order for charges to be forwarded to the district attorney's office and in order for the district attorney to pursue those charges. If arrests aren't happening in a post-George Floyd 2020 era, where a lot of the rhetoric, which I was not on the side of, said defund the police, then we have to look at the fact that a lot of that rhetoric that took place hurt our efforts for reform because it put people back in the feeling we need to go back tough on crime. And tough on crime didn't work for us either. So there's a balance that we need to strike in the middle of this. And we have police officers who are scared to do policing because of the rhetoric that went forth, but also they're afraid of district attorneys who will hold them accountable if they fail under the law.
Well, hang on. We got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about, is there a middle and is there an alternative? I mean, if prison and incarceration is not the answer, then what is? We'll talk about all this after the break.
We're saying let's re-examine the bail laws in the area of violent offenders. Robbery is a violent crime. So as soon as we catch them, the system releases them and they repeat the action. When I say we're the laughingstock of the country, this is what I'm talking about. How do we keep our cities safe when the other parts of the criminal justice system, they have abandoned our public safety apparatus?
Well, many echo New York City Mayor Eric Adams' concerns that bail reform is allowing offenders who commit crimes back on the streets within days, if not hours, only to reoffend again. But others insist that those who reoffend are only a small fraction of those who are released.
Here's the challenge we have. The criminal justice system we've been using in this country for 40 years says jail and prison is the solution to crime. but it fails almost 80% of the time. And to me, as somebody who's dedicated my life to the criminal justice system, an 80% failure rate is unacceptable. And to put forward stories of the failures of the current approach in 1 or 2 cities is important, and we should look at that. Violence is never acceptable. What happened to Kim and Irene is terrible, and it shouldn't happen. And nobody should be saying it's okay for somebody to be violent. We should also, in that conversation, be honest that there were tragedies well before what we're doing right now to reform this system, and that people were released from prison after serving their entire time and committed horrible offenses. In fact, at a higher rate than they do now. And so for the media and anyone else to suggest that reform is the problem is misplaced. Are there people that commit horrible offenses that require us to respond? Absolutely. Does it mean jail and prison should be the answer to every problem? No, we know that definitively. We have 40 years of evidence to show us that that is not the way to safety.
But then what is your answer? Because that's why you're here. I don't want to just come out here and bash the reform system. That's why I have you here to speak on behalf of progressive reform. But if prison doesn't work, and I wholeheartedly agree that if you take somebody and lock them up in a cage for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years, and turn them loose, they're not going to necessarily be better citizens. They don't learn anything. I understand that for every dollar you spend on education in prison, you're going to save $5 in terms of having to take care of that person in some other way. I get it, but a lot of them don't want to participate in the programs that are available in prison. You know that, and I know that. But what is the alternative? Because if you've got someone like the gentleman here that is attacking these women and others, what's your plan for someone like that?
And that person was released under different district attorneys who had a tough on crime approach, was given short prison sentences, and continued to offend and offend and offend. So we can't suggest that reform was the problem with this man that violently attacked women. Is he a problem? 100%. Do we need a solution? 100%.
What is it?
It has to be a locked mental health facility where that man can get the treatment he needs. He's obviously severely mentally ill. He's attacking people unprovoked. He's attacking them for reasons that nobody can explain. There's obviously something happening in that man's brain.
But you agree he should not be in a free society. He needs to be locked down somewhere.
Until we figure out what the problem is and a medication regimen or some kind of treatment regimen that is appropriate to what he's struggling with. I don't know this man. I haven't seen his file. But we can tell by his conduct that there's serious mental health issues. When we address those, hopefully he can be in society. Until we do, we have to be safe and take the precautions we need. But prison didn't solve that. Let's be honest about that.
The problem with progressive prosecutors and ideological prosecutors is that they start releasing people before they have a plan. So when she says to you that progressive prosecutors want that person in a custodial setting so that they can receive mental health treatment, they haven't done any of that. Their plan is to release first and, again, hope that he complies with the program.
We can have different opinions, Dr. Phil, but we can't have different facts. The fact is that those who were more moderate or even harsher on crime, tougher on crime, they didn't have a plan either.
All right, we have to take a break. When we come back, I want to add some of our audience views on this as well when we come back. We've been talking not only about how to make our streets safer from crime, but how to do so in a more humane way. Now, I think everybody agrees if you take somebody and lock them up in a cage, throw away the key for 20 years and come back and let them out, probably not going to be a better person. Something needs to happen during that time. If you let them out, there's got to be a plan to keep people safe. You guys have been listening to this conversation. Where do you come down on this? What do you think about it? What's your name?
My name's Lisa.
Okay, Lisa, what do you have to say?
Do we do psychological testing of all assailants before convicting them of the crime to see if we can reform them through putting them in a lockdown facility to keep others safe but give them the mental help they need so they can be productive in society.
Okay, but if somebody runs over your foot, do you care why? Whether they did it because they're mentally ill or if they're just a bad person? Your foot's still crushed, right? So they still need to be held accountable for it one way or the other. I mean, do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. I think that the biggest thing is to look at the crime itself. And like the crime with their cases, it was reoccurring and escalating. So do we let that person be in a lockdown facility, or do we keep them locked up and give them the mental help that they need?
Okay, but you agree they shouldn't be on the street?
Correct.
Whether they're in a psychiatric facility that's a lockdown or a jail. Does everybody agree this perpetrator should not have been on the street? Exactly. Everybody agrees with that. And maybe that person needed psychological help, psychiatric help, medication, whatever, but he should not have been on the street. Until you can say with some degree of certainty that he's not likely to reoffend. And I can tell you as a mental health professional, there are some people that you can never say that about. There are some people that they're just not going to comply. So, you know, anybody over here? Yes.
I think that, like, especially under sex and violent offenses, they should not be let out because there's a reason that they're in there.
You've had a family member that was let out.
Yeah, he was recently let out after 35 years in prison for violence, multiple violent offenses.
Should he have been?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like, there's no way. Nobody is safe when somebody like that is let out.
Okay, so he should, you say even your own family member should be.
Should not be out.
He should be locked up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And do you guys agree that there are some people that don't respond to treatment?
Yes, but it's a very small percentage. And what we have done is cast the net so widely that we're capturing millions of Americans in that net inappropriately. There's a reason no other country has the incarceration rate we do and the public safety failures that we do. It's because they're investing in real solutions to the problems. Our focus is entirely on punishment after the fact and not on prevention before the fact, preventing these women from even having to have that experience. If we had front-end mental health treatment that would have treated this man before he started randomly attacking people, if we had housed him and provided the services he needed to avoid a life of crime, we all would have been better for it. We're much better off preventing a crime from ever happening than trying to exact some punishment after the fact that does nothing, honestly, to restore the sense of safety or security for the victims of those crimes.
But that's a generational objective. That's not something that's going to fix and keep all of these people safe today.
We have to, of course, we have to bridge our way there, but we have to start. We talked about not having a plan under previous DAs in this county. People released from prison are released with $200, no housing, no job, no plan. There is no plan right now, we have to do better.
We have to have humanity and within the context of the criminal justice reform.
I get it.
Many of these patterns start in childhood. I spent 13 years in San Diego County's foster care system, lost both of my parents very early. I saw firsthand the impacts of my mother going through the criminal justice system and me even encountering the juvenile justice system. And we have to address childhood trauma. We have to address people at the root where they come from. And I think that's part of this reform attitude is that we have to get to the bottom of a lot of these behaviors. Yes, we have to address the crime right now that's happening on the streets. And we have to address that quickly because people are getting hurt and they shouldn't be. On the other hand, that this attitude comes from looking at the context of where some of these offenses are coming from. And we have to look at this system by case basis to look at who can turn their life around, who can have the opportunities to do this. But the blanket approach that those who have been leading the criminal justice system for some odd 30 plus years, those approaches have not worked either.
When we come back, I'm going to weigh in on what I think, and we'll get final thoughts right after the break. You've heard me say a million times, I don't care how flat you make a pancake, it's got two sides. And we've heard from this side, we've heard from this side. And I'm going to tell you what I think. I think you have a compelling argument to be made long term I think you don't have much of an argument short term, because you have to suppress bad behavior right now when you've got people that are committing crimes and are reoffending. And there has to be a way for people to qualify for alternatives to incarceration. Do we have too many people incarcerated? We lead the world. We lead the world in developed nations in incarceration. That's a black mark on society. And it's easy to say, well, then quit committing so many crimes. Well, people commit crimes because of circumstance. And if you're going to stop such a high incidence of crime, then you've got to change the circumstance from which they come. You got to give them alternatives. You've got to give them a better circumstance, better alternatives, better influence. I get that. And that's not a throwaway statement when I say I get that. I get that. That is a long-term solution that is worthy of a long-term investment. We also have to deal with keeping society safe. That's the balance. But you can't have DAs that come in with their own ideology and don't enforce the laws they were elected to enforce. If they don't like the laws, then get them changed. Change the legislation. When you change the legislation, you get money put behind it. And when you get the money put behind it, that's when you can start making the generational change. And I just spent time on Capitol Hill talking about this very thing with legislators. You know, it's been said many times, Dr. Phil bleeds blue. I do. I support law enforcement. I support the men and women who get up every morning and put that uniform on and go stand in the gap to keep us safe. So God bless all of you who do that. And if they arrest them and then we don't do what we have to, once they arrest them, we're going to lose motivation.
Well, and that's one of the biggest frustrations of American law enforcement is we can arrest every offender in the country, but if they are not prosecuted and they are not punished, because they need to be punished. You know, America is a gentleman's agreement. We're supposed to behave. You behave, I behave, and if we don't, we get punished. And when that gentleman's agreement, if you will, is not followed, the Constitution allows for punishment.
Well, what I hope the two sides of this do, and in any way I can bridge that, is we don't go into this trying to win the argument, but instead trying to solve the problem.
Amen.
We need to have more conversation.
Wouldn't it be great if all of a sudden the two sides in America started trying to solve the problem instead of win the argument? Wouldn't that be great? And that's what I think. And I think you four have been very reasonable voices about this whole thing. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Thank you guys for coming. We'll be talking about this some more, and I'll be inviting you back here to continue this narrative, okay?
Thank you.
Can we do that? All right.
Thank you.
A special thanks to Kim Glass and Irene Lee. Thank you for coming and talking about this today. I also want to thank Eric Segal and Betsy Smith, Christine DeBerry, and Reverend Shane Harris for participating in a very thoughtful and respectful way with each other. I think we had some intelligent conversation here today. For more information about today's episode, log on to drphil.com. And if you want to add your voice to the conversation, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you're in the Los Angeles area and you want to be here, we would love to have you join us. Just go to drphil.com, click on Be Part of the Audience for all the details. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to my podcast, Fill in the Blanks, where I provide critical information on some of the most important issues we're facing today. And check out Robin's podcast, I've Got a Secret with Robin McGraw. She swaps secrets with thought leaders, innovators, and friends. Get in on the secret squad. Listen for free on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. We will see you next time. Thanks, guys.